How's it going, everybody? Welcome to week 14. Really moving along here. The last 2 weeks are going to be kind of fast and furious, but for this class, I don't know. In this class, not so much. We're sort of almost to the 21st century, so just kind of wrapping some things up, actually. The last little bit, though, I mean, it is a little bit. You have a quiz this week. Again, please look at the review guide. Do note there's no writing on this quiz, no 5Ws, so it's just sort of content because we have been covering a lot. There's a lot of terms that we've gone over for this quiz. It goes back to the 20th century conflicts, 20th century challenges, and then this week with the Cold War issues and counterculture movements. But that gets us up to like the 1990s. So we're almost in the 21st century, which is exciting. So look at that. The content for this week. I know it's a lot. There's a lot of terms and names, so a lot was going on in the 20th century. Sort of one big, and they're both sort of contrasting, sort of, I guess, moving somewhat in parallel. You have this sort of Cold War world, and again, called the Cold War because the idea was that it wasn't hot. That you have these sort of proxy issues. Starts right from the beginning in Germany in the Berlin airlift, where again they're not fighting Berlin. If you look at that map, is fully enveloped by Eastern Germany, which is part of the USSR, this sort of bipolar world, and then so it's cut off. But then the Western Allies are keeping it provisioned. That's kind of the first Cold War. Then it goes to Korea, which again is sort of backed by both sides. So the Koreans are sort of the proxies within that. And then we sort of see how the Cold War sort of goes. There's sort of beginning, a middle, where there is still some ongoing conflicts. Vietnam is one of those, but also some thawing of the Cold War, where they're coming together. And then ultimately the end of the Cold War, where which is again sort of epitomized by the fall of the Berlin Wall. I gave a nice little, found a nice website. Sort of goes over the history of the Berlin Wall and also the fall of it and why it's significant. So and then. Another movement that's going with that, sort of talked about these independence movements that started after World War I and were sort of stymied between World War and a war period with the Great Depression and then ultimately World War II. But that kind of cracked open these self-determination movements. So you have, independence in India, in China, the fall of imperialism in Africa, this decolonization all throughout the globe. So I've just tried to fill in a few of those as we went. Latin America, it's already been decolonized, but this other sort of, they can become sort of part of this new, what kind of nations do they want to build? Sort of get back to that nation idea. A lot of them then kind of moved away from the Western capitalist into more socialist elements. Look for different trading partners, what kind of alliances they want to make. These worlds, a lot of countries in Africa too, so we're choose between where, once they became independent, where do they want to fit in to this bipolar world. There was a third sort of non-aligned countries that didn't really want to, try to sort of stay out of this sort of east-west division or capitalist communist, but it was a little very complicated in the 20th century. So this kind of goes back to this idea of that's why we sort of started thinking about nations as decolonization came up. What are these nations going to do? How are they going to face this? How are they going to, become independent, create these myths, legends of identity, which is still a challenge today in a lot of these places, because they were sort of, these nations were formed out of empires, which maybe weren't put together, determined by sort of shared culture and traditions, all sorts of things. And then the third part of this is these social movements, sort of counterculture, that not everyone was aboard of, following the line that this is the way it's going to be and always be, in social movements, civil rights, women's rights, LGBTQ rights, indigenous rights, environmental rights, they're all kind of wrapped up and working together, that you have this sort of enlightenment in practice, that if we're going to have these rights, how are we going to fulfill them? What does that really mean? And so so that's why we went back, if you look at like Mary Wollstonecraft, right, she was talking about, okay, let's give education to women, right? Why are we kind of putting them off in this box, and kind of bringing those ideas about? And then through the world wars, and women become more active in the workplace. After World War II, a lot of women didn't want to go back to be the domestic sphere. They liked the sort of freedom ideas, voting, suffrage, and ability to sort of govern their own lives. You see that with civil rights. You see that with environmental rights as well. Indigenous rights, particularly in Hawaii, right? The sort of indigenous rights movements, hokulea, music, Hunani K. Trask. Hunani K. Trask, I gave a video on her. She talks about that. And not just in the Western world, but globally. There's global movements against sort of the powers that be on both sides there. So that's kind of that. And so quiz 3, again, no writing, a lot of terms. Just go through the review guide. If you've been paying attention, it shouldn't be too difficult. Maps, fill in the blank, matching, pretty straightforward. No writing. And again, because it's Thanksgiving, the due dates, it'll be anywhere between Friday and Sunday. You can turn it in. So just anytime it fits into your schedule there. You do have assigned review terms. Try to get those in by Wednesday, though I'll be a little flexible on those. I know everyone's kind of busy. Maybe you're traveling. If you can get those kind of in by Thursday or Friday too, that's fine. Great. I think that's it. Have a good Thanksgiving.